My name is Ted Garrison. I'm 56 years old, and I spent 5 years paying for a family that had already decided I wasn't one of them. The day I figured it out, I was sitting in my truck in the parking lot of a Walmart on Route 6 with my phone in my hand and a bag of wrapped Christmas presents on the back seat. My son had texted me the week before. Just a quick one. Keeping it small this year, Dad. Just us and Gwen's family. You understand? I told him I understood. I even told myself I understood. Then the next morning, a Facebook notification pulled me in. My daughter-in-law had tagged a photo, 52 people in it. My son, my grandkids, her parents, her siblings, her cousins, their kids. A Christmas tree that touched the ceiling. There was a man in the center holding my grandson Charlie on his shoulders, and they were both wearing matching reindeer sweaters. The caption said, "Family is everything." I sat in that parking lot for 23 minutes without moving. Then I drove back home with the presents still in the back seat. Let me take you back a little, so you understand what I'm telling you. My wife died of ovarian cancer when she was 51. I'm not going to give you a long scene about that because some things aren't for the internet, and some things I still don't have the right words for. What I will tell you is that she handled everything when it came to family. Holidays, birthdays, the phone calls just to check in. She kept a color-coded calendar on the fridge with everyone's schedule on it. When she died, I stared at that calendar for a week, and then I took it down because I didn't know how to be the person who uses a color-coded calendar. I'm a contractor. I read blueprints. I know how to build things. I was 62 days into figuring out how to be a widower when my son brought his girlfriend home and said they were engaged. That part I remember being happy about. Genuinely. She seemed kind. She laughed at things and asked me questions about my work and told me I had a beautiful house. Her parents came to the engagement dinner, and her father, who I'll call my son's father-in-law, shook my hand for a long time and told me his family was my family now. I believed him. I had no reason not to. They got married 14 months later. I paid for the rehearsal dinner. I didn't say that at the time because it wasn't something you say. It was just what you do when you're the parent. And the other side happened to have less flexibility that particular year. Around that same time, my son told me they'd found a house they loved, but the mortgage payment was a stretch on their combined income. He asked if I could help bridge the gap for a year or two, until they got settled. I said yes. I set up a transfer, $1,100 a month, first of the month, to their joint checking. A year later, I co-signed on a truck loan when my son's credit wasn't where it needed to be. $618 a month. I put both of them on my cell phone plan the year after that, because it was cheaper than what they were paying separately. And when my grandkids started elementary school, my daughter-in-law mentioned that the private school on Elm had a strong arts program. She mentioned it in a way that meant she'd already looked into it. Tuition was $9,200 a year per child. I told her I'd cover it. I want to be clear about something, because this part matters. I didn't do any of that quietly to build leverage. I did it because my wife would have done it, and I didn't know how to be the person who says no when family asks. There's a difference. I'm not sure I understood that difference existed until much later. I also want to say this before we go any further. In 5 years, my son's family never once asked how I was doing in any way that required a real answer. They asked the way you ask someone in a grocery store aisle, good, good. Then moved on. That's not a complaint. It's just a thing I noticed and set down next to the other things I noticed. In late November, I drove 40 minutes to deliver Thanksgiving to their house. Turkey, stuffing I'd learned to make off YouTube after my wife died, sweet potato casserole. I rang the doorbell at noon. My daughter-in-law answered and said they were just heading out. Her mom needed help with something. Could I just leave the food in the kitchen? I did. I left it and I drove home and I ate a sandwich. Then came the Christmas text. Keeping it small this year. And then the photograph. I want to describe that photograph to you because I've thought about it so many times I could reconstruct it blind. 52 people in what must have been a rented hall. High ceilings, round tables with white tablecloths. My son standing behind his wife with his hands on her shoulders, smiling. Charlie, my grandson, up on his other grandfather's shoulders in the matching sweater. Emmy, my granddaughter, 4 years old, sitting in his wife's lap. In the corner of the frame, almost cut off, a table of gifts. I counted the presents with ribbon on them. There were 11. Mine were in a bag on my back seat. I didn't comment. I closed the app. 2 days later, I drove over to drop off the gifts. My daughter-in-law answered. She said the kids were at her mom's. Could I leave them by the door? I said I'd just come in for a second if that was all right. She hesitated in a way I felt but couldn't name, and then she stepped back. Their hallway. I hadn't been in it since summer when I helped them move a couch. My daughter-in-law had done a gallery wall the year they moved in. The whole left side, floor to ceiling almost, matching frames. I'd seen the finished version in a photo she'd texted my son. It looked good, but standing inside it, something was wrong. I used to know where I was on that wall. There was a photo from Charlie's second birthday, the one where I'm holding him on my shoulders at the backyard cookout, and one of me and my son at his college graduation, the summer before my wife got sick. I knew those photos existed because I had copies of them in my own house. I looked for them. I walked the whole wall slowly, the way I walk a job site checking for violations, then I counted. 31 frames, not one had me in it. There were 3 of my son's other grandfather. One of him teaching Charlie to fish off a dock, one of him and Emmy making cookies, one of the whole family at what looked like a 4th of July, him in the center with a sparkler. I didn't say anything. I set the gifts by the stairs and told my daughter-in-law I'd let her get back to her day. I drove straight to my sister's house on the other side of town. She's 63. She lives alone since her divorce, and she grows tomatoes in her backyard and she doesn't hold anything back, which used to exhaust me, and now I depend on it. I told her about the photo, then the wall. I told it flat, the way I'd describe a bad foundation to a client. Here's what I found, here's what it means structurally. She listened. She didn't make the noise I was afraid she'd make, the consoling one. She got up, went to her counter, and came back with her phone. When's the last time you saw Charlie play soccer? She said. October, I said, the Saturday game. She showed me the screen. It was a reel my daughter-in-law had posted. Charlie scoring a goal, Emmy jumping up and down on the sideline, both grandparents from the other side in camp chairs with a banner that said, Charlie's #1 fans. Posted 3 weeks ago. There was a Saturday in that window I hadn't been told about. I looked at the date. I'd been at their house that exact Saturday morning to drop off a check for the school balance. I'd stayed 20 minutes. Nobody mentioned a game. They're not forgetting to include you, my sister said. She said it the way she says everything, like the sentence had been sitting there the whole time, and she was just the one willing to pick it up. They're choosing not to. I started to say something about how my son's father-in-law had a closer relationship with the kids from seeing them more often. Some reasonable explanation I'd been building in my head for the whole drive over. She held up a finger. My neighbor Hank told me something 2 weeks ago. Hank does my books at the end of every fiscal year. He has a small account practice, and he charges me in fishing trips. He said you've been running about 25,000 out in personal transfers annually. That's on top of the school tuition and the cosign. I hadn't told Hank to say that to my sister. I found out later he'd mentioned it because he was worried. 5 years, she said. Give or take. That's north of $100,000. I looked at her window. Her tomatoes were all gone for the season, just the wire cages standing in the dirt. And they left the gifts by the door, she said. There's a moment where you know something you've been trying not to know. It doesn't feel like revelation. It feels like the opposite, like something going very quiet. I sat at my sister's kitchen table, and I felt that quiet for a while. I went home that night and looked at the banking app, 4 scheduled transfers, the mortgage supplement, the truck payment, the school account, which I'd set up directly with the school, the cell plan, which pulled automatically. I put my finger on the first one and held it there for a long time. Then I closed the app and set the phone face down on the kitchen table. Before I did anything, I gave it one chance. I want to be honest about this part, not because it makes me look better, but because it's true. I called my son the next morning. Not about the photograph, not about the wall. I didn't use any of that. I told him I'd been thinking about Christmas and was wondering if there was any chance we could find a day to get together, even a few days after. Just us and the kids. He said he'd have to check with his wife. He said the holiday schedule was already pretty packed. He said, and this is the part I've played back, you know how it is, Dad. The kids have so much going on. I said, I know how it is. He said, we'll find something. That was December 29th. He never followed up. I checked. I have my phone records. January 1st, I opened the app at 7 in the morning with my coffee still steaming next to me. It was still dark outside. I worked through the transfers in order. Mortgage supplement. The app asked if I was sure. I pressed confirm. Truck payment. I had to call the lender directly since I was the co-signer. I spoke to a woman who was patient and professional and explained that removing a co-signer required my son to refinance independently. I told her I understood and that I'd be sending a certified letter to that effect. I sent it that afternoon. School account. This one I thought about for 3 days before I acted. That money was for Charlie and Emmy. It had always been for them. I drove to the school on a Thursday and met with the business office and explained that I wanted to restructure the account, so payments went directly to the school and bypassed the family's joint account entirely. The school was helpful about it. They have a process for this. More families do it than you'd think. Cell plan. I removed their lines. I added a note to my calendar to text my son when it happened, so he wasn't caught somewhere without service. Because he's still my son, and I'm still his father, and those are different things. I sent the text on the 8th. Heads up, removed you and your wife from my plan. Should have done it a while ago, no hard feelings. He read it and didn't respond. The mortgage supplement didn't bounce until the 3rd week of January, because there was enough residual in their account to cover the gap. When it finally hit, I was in the middle of a kitchen renovation on Clearwater Drive, and my phone started going. 3 calls in 40 minutes, all from my son. I didn't answer during the job. I called back at 5:30. He said there was a bank error. He said they'd been trying to figure it out all day. He said the mortgage was going to come up short. And did I know anything about it? I said yes. I'd stopped it. I'd been covering their mortgage supplement for 4 years, and I'd stopped it. There was silence long enough that I could hear the refrigerator in my own kitchen humming. Then, what? I said I'd also notified the truck lender, and that the school payments were going directly to the school now, not through their account. You can't just. He stopped, Dad. We have a mortgage. I know. You didn't say anything. I sent you a certified letter in January. A longer pause. My wife handles the mail. I didn't say anything to that. Dad, why? Why would you do this? I'd thought for a long time about how to answer that question. I'd written it out on a legal pad and crossed most of it out. What I had left was short. I need to ask you something first. When did Charlie stop calling me Grandpa? The silence this time was different. The refrigerator kept humming. That's not. It is. When did that change? Dad, this is not the time. It's the only time. Answer me, and we can talk about everything else. He didn't answer. He said he had to go. He said they'd figure out the mortgage. He said he'd call me back. He didn't call back that night. He called back at 9 the next morning. His wife was on the line too. I could tell from the way my son's voice changed, that careful, measured tone he uses when he's performing for an audience. He said they wanted to understand what I was feeling. He said family was important to both of them. He used the phrase, move forward together, twice. At one point, my daughter-in-law said she hoped I knew how much they valued my role in the family. I let her finish. Then I said, when's the last time you invited me to something? She said, we've had you over. When? Quiet. Thanksgiving, she said. I invited you for Thanksgiving. You let me leave food at your door. More quiet. The Christmas party, I said. 52 people. My grandson in the matching sweater with your father. I heard her exhale. We didn't think you'd be comfortable, she said. It's a big group, mostly our side of the family. We didn't want you to feel like an outsider. I sat with that for a moment. You didn't want me to feel like an outsider, so you made sure I was one. I didn't say that out loud. I said, I need you to hear something. The school payments are going directly to the school. That doesn't change. That money belongs to Charlie and Emmy, and I'm not touching it. But the rest of it is done. The mortgage, the truck, the plan. It's done. My son said, Dad, you can't just. I can. I just did. My daughter-in-law went quiet. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Stripped down to something that sounded more honest. You're punishing us over a Christmas party. I said, I'm not punishing anyone. I stopped supplementing a family I'm not allowed to be part of. She hung up. My son stayed on another 30 seconds and then he was gone too. Before I go further, I want to stop the story here for a second, because that night, after I hung up, I sat in my kitchen with my hands on the table and asked myself honestly if I'd gone too far. If you were me, would you have turned any of it back on? Type yes or no. I read every comment on these. I really do. And if you want to know what happened at my son's birthday dinner 3 weeks later, hit that like button and I'll keep going. My sister called that evening. She'd heard from a neighbor whose daughter was friends with my daughter-in-law. Apparently, I was being discussed as a man having some kind of episode. "How are you?" she asked. "Fine," I said. "Are you actually fine, or are you contractor fine? Where you say fine, but you mean you've been in a hole all day and you're not going to tell anyone?" "Second one," I said. She came over. She brought soup she'd made the week before and frozen, and we sat at my kitchen table and she said, "You were too quiet for too long." I know. You let them think quiet meant yes. I had no answer for that because it was correct. Here's the thing about being a certain kind of man. The kind who does the doing and doesn't discuss it, who figures that the doing is enough. It isn't always wrong. On a job site, doing without discussing is usually the right call. But families aren't job sites. The people in your life cannot read a blueprint. If you never say "I want to be in this family," they will assume you've agreed to whatever role they've assigned you, and then they'll keep assigning. Stop being legible, and you'll be read wrong every time. That's what happened. I spent 5 years being the floor underneath their lives and never once said, "That floor is me." I built something they could walk on, and I never put my name on it, so they didn't think of it as mine. The birthday dinner was my son's 40th. His wife had planned it at a restaurant in town, 14 people, the kind of dinner where there are name cards and a prefix menu. I'd been invited. An actual invitation, this time, texted 2 weeks out. I thought about not going. Then I thought about the 31 frames on that wall, and I decided that the only place in the world they couldn't hang up on me was a room with 12 other witnesses. I got there early. I sat at the end of the table closest to the door, not the center, not the power seat, just where I could see the whole room. My son's father-in-law was already there. He nodded at me. I nodded back. We had nothing to say to each other, and neither of us pretended otherwise, which I respected. My son came in with his wife on his arm, and he saw me and something moved across his face. Relief, I think, or maybe surprise. He'd expected me to skip it. The dinner was fine for the first hour. Then his father-in-law stood up to give a toast, and he talked about the family, about how proud he was, about how much he loved watching my son become the man he was. Good toast. Genuine. Then he raised his glass and said, "And to the 2 families that made this happen, because the right family changes everything." Heads turned. Not all of them. 8, maybe 10 people looking at that one word too. I waited. Then my daughter-in-law's brother, who'd had a couple drinks and apparently thought he was helping, laughed and said, "Well, the one family did the heavy lifting, at least." A few people smiled, a polite laugh from one end of the table, and then it hit a patch of silence and died there. My son was looking at his plate. I folded my napkin, set it beside my plate, stood up. "Can I borrow the microphone?" I said. There was no microphone. I just set it to the room. 12 people looked at me. My daughter-in-law's brother stopped smiling. I didn't take anything out of my pocket. I'd said it enough times to the bathroom mirror. "My name is Ted Garrison," I said, and my voice held. "I'm the birthday boy's father, and Charlie and Emmy's grandfather on their dad's side." Somebody's fork clinked against a glass. Nobody else moved. "He's right, that family does the heavy lifting," I said. "I've been doing some of the lifting for about 5 years. The mortgage supplement that ran for 4 of those years. The truck loan I co-signed. Both kids at Elm Street School." I turned to my son. "I stopped 3 of those in January. The school account is still running, and it's not going anywhere. That one belongs to your kids, not to anyone's budget." My son was looking at the table. His wife had gone perfectly still. "I didn't come here to make anyone uncomfortable on a birthday," I said. "I came because he's my son, and it's his 40th, and I'm his father. That's it. That's the whole thing." I looked at him directly. "Happy birthday." I sat down. 4 seconds. I counted them. Then a woman at the far end, my son's old college roommate's wife, someone I'd met exactly twice, started clapping. Slowly. Then the 2 people next to her. Then half the table. Not wild, not a standing ovation. Just steady, like people deciding something privately and making it audible. My daughter-in-law's brother did not clap. My daughter-in-law looked at her water glass. My son reached under the table and squeezed my arm once, which I hadn't expected, and which I'm still thinking about. I left before the dessert course. I said what I came to say, and I'm not built for the aftermath. He caught me in the parking lot, not his wife, him. He came out the side door with his jacket half on, just caught me at my truck. You didn't have to do it that way, he said. But he said it quietly, not angrily, like a man reporting a fact rather than making an accusation. No, I said, I didn't. You could have just told me. I tried in December. You said you'd check with your wife. He stood there in the parking lot in January with his breath showing in the cold. He's tall now, taller than me since he was 19. He got that from his mother's side. Charlie started calling you by your first name, he said. I know you know. I want you to know I didn't. I didn't tell him to. I didn't make a decision about it. It just happened. She'd correct him at dinners and I didn't. He stopped. I didn't push back. I should have pushed back. Yes. I'm sorry, Dad. I want to be careful here because I've had time to think about this. My son saying he was sorry, standing in that parking lot. I believed him. I think he meant it. I also think meaning it and understanding it are two different things, and he understood maybe 60% of it that night, which is more than zero, and I decided to take the 60%. Okay, I said. What does okay mean? It means I heard you. It doesn't mean everything's the same as it was. I took an index card out of my shirt pocket. I'd written 4 things on it, and I'd been carrying it for 3 weeks. I put it on his hand. Wednesday afternoons, I said. I pick the kids up from school. Consistent, not when it's convenient, every Wednesday. He nodded. I get told about things, games, concerts, holidays. I find out with enough time to show up, not after, on social media. Okay. When your wife's family is there, I can be there too. I'm not asking to be the center of anything. I'm asking to be in the room. He nodded again. And I don't lend money. Not again. Not for an emergency. Not for anything. If there's real trouble, I'll help figure out a plan. But the transfers are done. He closed his hand around the index card. He stood there another moment. I didn't know how much it was, he said. The total. I didn't add it up. I know. Dad. He stopped. She's not. Gwen isn't. He rubbed his face. Her family is very present. They were there in a way that you weren't after Mom. And I let the gap get filled and I didn't think about what that meant for you. I just didn't think. He looked at me. That's worse than if I'd decided, isn't it? Yeah, I said. It is. I'm going to fix it with Charlie. You show him, I said. Kids update when they get new information. Charlie's smart. He always has been. The first Wednesday, I picked the kids up from school and took them to my garage workshop. Charlie stood in the middle of it, with his hands in his pockets, the way serious people stand when they're taking in a new space. 8 years old and already doing inventory. Can you teach me to use that? He pointed at the miter saw. Not today. Today you learn the tape measure. You earn the saw. He thought about that. How long does the tape measure take? Until I say you're ready. That's not a specific amount of time. No, I said. It isn't. He held out his hand, just like that. No argument, no negotiation. Understanding that some things have to be earned and you start where you start. I handed him the tape measure without making a thing of it. It's been 8 months since that parking lot conversation. Some things have changed and some things haven't. My daughter-in-law and I have a civil arrangement. We're not close and I don't think we will be, and I've made my peace with that. She's not a bad person. I've turned that over many times and I keep landing in the same place. She didn't set out to erase me. She just had a family who was very much there, and I was a bank transfer she never had to look at, and when those two things sit next to each other long enough, the transfer becomes invisible, and the people in the room become the family. That's not cruelty. That's just how attention works when no one corrects it. My son is doing the work, I see it. He texts now, actual texts, not just responses. He called last month to tell me about a problem at his job before it was resolved, just to talk it through. That hadn't happened in 5 years. I don't know if he knows how much that cost him or how much it means to me. I don't need him to know. It happened. Charlie asked me on a Wednesday 3 months ago, while we were measuring a piece of oak for a shelf he wanted to build, whether I was his real grandpa. I stopped what I was doing. Where did that question come from? I asked. He shrugged the way 8-year-olds shrug. Full body, maximum effort, minimum information. Mom's mom said I have two grandpas, but the other one always says grandpa. So I was wondering which is the real one. I crouched down. My knees made a sound about it. I stayed there anyway. You have two grandfathers, I said. Your dad's wife's father is your grandfather by marriage. I'm your dad's father. That makes me your grandfather by blood. Both are real. You don't have to choose. He considered this carefully, the way he considers everything. Does it bother you, he said, that he says grandpa and you don't? Fair question. Best question anyone had asked me in a very long time. It used to, I said. It doesn't anymore. You know why? Why? Because I know who I am, and now you know who I am, and that's the part that actually matters. He looked at the piece of oak, then, can I hammer the dowels in? You earned it, I said. Get the mallet. The school account cleared $47,000 in October. I still put in $800 a month, same as always. I never mentioned the number to my son or his wife. I told my sister, who told me I was a stubborn idiot, who was also somehow going to be fine. The mortgage is current. My son refinanced the truck in March at a rate that wasn't great but wasn't terrible. They're managing. My daughter-in-law redid the gallery wall. I don't know what's on it, and I haven't asked. On my own wall, next to the front door where I see it every morning, there's a photograph from Charlie's school winter concert. He's in the third row in a white button-down shirt. He's looking directly at the camera, which surprised me when I printed it, because I was in the fifth row, and I didn't think he could see me from there. But he was looking right at me. He told me later he was looking for me specifically, because his dad had said I'd be there, and he wanted to make sure. He wanted to make sure I was in the room. I keep thinking about the difference between that picture and the Christmas photo. 52 people, matching sweaters. The caption that said, "Family is everything." That photo was beautiful. You could see money and care in every detail. Somebody planned it for weeks. And I wasn't in it. The concert photo is blurry. The gymnasium lighting was terrible. I took it with the same phone I used to schedule job sites. And somewhere in the fifth row is the back of my head. And in the third row is my grandson looking for me in a crowd. Here's what I know now that I should have understood years ago. The people who matter to you cannot read your silence. They will interpret it as whatever is most convenient. If you never say I want to be in this family, they will assume you've agreed to whatever role they've decided on. And then they'll keep deciding, and the assumption will harden into structure, and one day, you'll be standing in a hallway counting 31 frames and looking for your own face. I paid for a family for 5 years without ever saying I was the one paying. I thought the doing was enough. I thought money was a kind of presence. It wasn't. Money is just money. Presence is when you put your name on the chair before you walk in. I didn't do that. I let them read my silence as consent, and the only way I found to stop it was to make enough noise. In a parking lot, in a restaurant, in a garage teaching an 8-year-old to read a tape measure, that the silence couldn't be mistaken for agreement anymore. That's the right amount of noise, not revenge, not a speech designed to win a room, just enough sound that the people who mattered finally heard me standing there. If any part of this landed for you, type A or B in the comments. A if you think I should have ended all 4 transfers, including the school money. B if you think keeping the school accounts separate was the right call. I read every comment, including the ones that say I was wrong. And if you want to know what happened the first time Charlie called me Grandpa again, just the two of us in my garage on a Wednesday afternoon. Leave a comment and I'll tell you in the next one. Thanks for sitting with me all the way through.